Welcome to That Entrepreneur Life, a podcast about entrepreneurship that takes you from idea to launch and beyond. Each week, your hosts, Andrew Lees and Clint McPherson, discuss different business topics aimed at adding value to any entrepreneur's journey.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of That Entrepreneur Life. I'm Andrew Lees, and as always, I'm here with my co-host, Clint McPherson. What's up, man?
Not much, brother. Just living that entrepreneurial life. And again, having a special guest on. And I don't want to go back and forth with you too much because I want to go ahead and kick this thing off right away and welcome our special guest, Case Lane, to the show.
Thank you.
For sure. Yeah, Case, it's an honor to have you on the show today. Before we get into everything and ask you a few questions, can you just tell our audience who you are and what you're all about?
Yeah, sure. I'm a writer, a podcaster, an entrepreneur. I'm the founder of Ready Entrepreneur. So I help aspiring entrepreneurs get started.
That's so awesome. And with that said, Case, I mean, as an entrepreneur yourself, like you just mentioned, you're a global writer, traveler, observer, and a podcaster. Can you take us back to where your entrepreneurial journey actually started and what it is about entrepreneurship that you're actually passionate about?
Yeah, I'm one of those people who was always interested in business and entrepreneurship and everything. But then I did, what you're supposed to do, apparently, which is to go to college and get a good professional job. So I did that. But that job happened to be in the Canadian Foreign Service. I grew up in Canada, and that took me overseas. And I had a chance, I was working in trade policy, and I had a chance to sort of see entrepreneurs around the world. And it sort of triggered that again in my mind that this is interesting. This business world is something I'm very interested in. And seeing entrepreneurs everywhere and realizing that even though people would say, oh, it's hard and it's this and it's that, I'd still see people all over the world just doing it and making it happen and so on. And so I decided I would, since I was in trade policy talking to business people, I figured I needed an MBA. I went back to school and I went from there into corporate. But I still was thinking about starting my own business. So then I ended up going back to school again because I was working in Hollywood, talking to lawyers, and I thought I could see this clash coming between technology and the law, and get into where that's going. But I thought, well, if I was on the law side and the tech side, wow, that I could just like give myself both salaries and then just talk to myself instead of trying to explain everything to lawyers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But while I was in law school, I actually started getting into ebook self-publishing, and I started realizing that this now entrepreneurship was not only just something that was you could try to do, but it had become just so possible and so real in a tangible way because you could go online and start a business right now. And what I saw that you could get your book out there, you could go directly to the community, you could find your audience, and the same thing applied to any other interest or skill or product or service that you had. That's what I decided. I did finish law school and I am technically a lawyer. I passed the bar, I got my license, but I decided that I would be full-time in online business. And the work that I was doing got other people asking me what I was doing. And that got me into doing that Ready Entrepreneur to help people get started.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure you had people asking you, hey, how are you doing this? And you probably you may have had a little bit of a better lifestyle in a way, like because if you've got some more freedom and you're able to do your own thing on your own time, under your own terms, I'm sure people were like, hey, how do I do that?
That's a big part of it because I am a global traveler. So I was in the Foreign Service. I traveled the world in the service. I traveled the world, even in my corporate jobs. And I continue to follow up. I have friends all over the world. So people throw out a trip, but I'm like, I'll be there. Of course, right now we're all grounded, which is sad. But that was one of the big things for me. I'm really into travel, and to sort of when you work in corporate. And okay, technically you get, 15 days off a year, but nobody takes them. So let's say you go to take a week off and you're thinking, that's all I've got to explore, whatever country. Like that's terrible. You want to have as much time as you'd like to have. And so that was a big thing for me. I thought, well, I really want to keep traveling, see the world, but I want to spend some real time. When you're when you have a chance, when people live in a country, and so you get to see it a little differently than typical tourists, you get used to doing that. And it's like, that's what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to sort of wander the streets and talk to the people and all that kind of stuff. And when you're on a tour or something, you sort of rush through it and then get back to work. So that was a big part of it for sure. And I think, people see that, and it's, why wait until you're retired and then start traveling, and then maybe you don't have your health, or you just are still afraid, or global pandemic shuts down the world and then you don't get the chance. So
yeah. Instead of trying to cram the fun stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Has your list hit 100 yet? Have you? I know you've broke 100.
Yeah, I had to update some of my posts, but I have broke 100 countries. I did that just before I was on a big trip. I traveled from November to February, so I got back to the U.S. the first week of February. Wow. And then, as we know, a month later, we were all grounded. So
yeah, you got back just in time, I guess.
Just in time, yeah.
I've heard of people kind of getting stranded in different countries, and especially people with like dual citizenships if they're somewhere else and not really being able to get back too easily. So
yeah, I think that transition part where people were stranded, I think that would have been horrible.
Yeah.
Really tough. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, it'll be good when we can all get back to some travel, and I think that'll be probably the most exciting part for a lot of people, is just kind of being able to get to that. And that's something that I think everybody would love to do more of, instead of just trying to cram it into 2 weeks a year. You're like, okay, these are my vacation weeks. Once you use them, I always thought that was so depressing.
Yeah, it's horrible.
You have a great time for like the first week and a half. And then if you take them all at once, right? So you have a great time for the first 75% of it. And then the last 25%, you're just dreading going back to work.
Exactly,
so it's like, you don't even have fun for the rest of it.
Yeah. So. And there's something else for entrepreneurs to keep in mind. One thing I love to tell people is part of this whole, technology explosion and everything is that your market is the whole world. Most people are online, so you have access to 7 billion people, and whatever product or service you have, you can market it to the whole world. So travel, as I always say, it becomes part of visiting your community. It becomes, visiting your neighborhoods and seeing. I love to look for the similarities between people. I like to look for where all the world has crossed paths over the centuries. And so when you travel, you get to see that, and you realize what these connections are. And then when you're running your business, and if you get an email from somebody in another country, and it's so great if you're able to say, wow, I was in your country and this is what I saw. And so it's just another great way to sort of build your connection to your community.
Exactly. Yeah. Gives you good talking points and some different perspective to connect with people. That's cool. Yeah. Well, yeah, I wanted to ask you about how do you coach your entrepreneurs that you work with to use globalization and technology to, kind of take their business to the next level? You touched on it a little bit, but what do you teach there?
Yeah. So one thing is that I'm at the very beginning of the process. I really want people to see the online business landscape and to understand, how you actually create a business and earn an income and build your lifestyle freedom and everything from this. So what I focus on is, first of all, with technology, I do a process around making sure, you have your business idea and the platforms where you're most comfortable. So let's say you like writing, you're going to be a blogger, you like talking, you want to be a podcaster, and so on. But then the way that I get into talking about how to use technology is we just get right into the tools. So depending on what path you want to follow, let's say you want to be a podcaster, we start looking at the tools. There are ways to get set up for free. And I always point that out to people as well. There's so many people who want to get started, but are really not sure what they want to do. And even when we go through the process of saying, well, do you like writing, or do you like speaking, or you want to be on camera? They're still not sure. So I always say, like, let's try, we're going to use the free services. And let's go, let's pick the one you think you like the most, start there for free. And if it starts to build up and work out, we could always transition to a paid hosting service or something like that. But I want to make it clear to people, a lot of people are afraid, like people saying, I don't have the money to get started. That's one of those things like, no, you don't need anybody to get started. I mean, you really can start with just your time. Entrepreneurs allocate resources. And so the resource could be your time, and that's or it's your money if you've got it. But if you've got your time and you put that time in, whether it's setting up a website, blogging, whatever you like to do, you can do that, and that's how you can start. And then as you reach out to build your community, it's what I was just saying before in terms of how you have to recognize that the entire world is your community. And a lot of people don't really understand that. Like they kind of get the idea that, yeah, you could watch, Hollywood movies in a foreign country type of thing. But what does it really mean on a day-to-day basis? And what it really means is that people have the same aspirations, they have the same issues, they have problems, they have anxieties, they want solutions. So whatever, or they just want entertainment, or they want education. So whatever your business idea is applicable to a much bigger community maybe than you're thinking about. Now, of course, you could have a business idea that is location specific. That's absolutely true as well. You can do that. But if it's more of a global approach, then what I say, you focus on what that community is. It's very, very important to know who you're talking to. And then you stick with your message, but you put that message out there into the world using social or building an email list, offering free products to get people started, things like that. And then what happens is you'll see people will come to you from all over the world. So I really encourage, like if people are running ads, I make sure, when you're starting out, you might want to run, target just people in a particular location. But then I always talk about how you branch that out, knowing not just what all the English-speaking countries are in the world if you're working in English, but also knowing which countries where English is taught in the schools in an early age. So those are going to be all part of your target countries as well, and you build up to them. So it's very important to be aware of that in the beginning, so that you don't miss out on your potential community, and they don't miss you because people are looking for you. They're looking for your ideas.
Yeah, for sure. I would totally agree with that. I mean, I think we as entrepreneurs or anybody that has a product or service, they typically pigeonhole themselves, right? They paint that picture of just focusing, having that narrow focus and putting the blinders on. And sometimes that can be good. But then when you do rule out that, the audience is your world, and you're like, well, no, only 7,500 people that is in this niche that focus on this. And it's like, what kind of market research did you actually do? Because you mentioned it. A lot of us have the same needs, wants, and aspirations. And so if you really pigeonhole yourself, and you're losing all of that, because you can talk to another audience, right? And like you said, there's so many other places that speak English, or English is their second or third language, and they can really still grasp your product and service. I mean, I love what you just said. And I really think as an entrepreneur, you got to figure out those touch points, and how to figure out how to reach out and get your message across to the right audience, and not just the audience that you have envisioned in your head, right?
Right. I mean, you do need to know what your message is, and stick with that. But in terms of demographically trying to be too narrow, again, I'm sure somebody's going to say I've got this business which is only for this town or whatever. Okay, fine. but in general, what you're looking at, if you've built a business from your interests and your skills, or you're just your hobbies, or just an idea in your head, you can think about, well, there's probably other people that came to this conclusion. And the idea I always say is that those people are not just around you, they're out there in the world. And it gives you even a bigger opportunity with your business, because some people worry that, everything's been done, but it's not, we're not even close to having everything done, right? And many times we're not close because it hasn't been done in the way that you can do it. So that particular product or service is not being offered in a way that resonates with you. And so if that's the case, there's probably more people out there that are thinking the same thing, and they're out there in the whole world. And that's why it's so important to reach out to them.
And so through all your work and your studies and travel, obviously we've mentioned that you've had the opportunity to observe and interact with entrepreneurs all over the world. And so you also mentioned on your website, when I was browsing it, that they have taught you specifically how entrepreneurship is woven, through the human DNA, which I thought that was cool and pretty powerful. I would love for you to kind of break that down for us to a degree, and see if you can speak to the individuals who are excited by the thought of creating their own business, and why they should take action if they actually have that opportunity.
Yeah, I'll start right there. Here's the thing, you're not alone. So that's what I like to say. And so many people within maybe their family or their community, people are going to be hesitant around the idea of starting a business. And it is just this part of us that says, oh, it's risky and it's scary and you should do something safe and all of that. So all these people might be discouraging you. But if you're that person who just can't get business ideas out of your head, you're that person who goes around saying, I could do that better. Or why isn't there a version of this? Or why doesn't that, if you're that person, again, you're not alone. There are people like you all over the world, and they're thinking the same thing. And so the only difference between those who make it and those who don't is actually acting on it and keep going, the perseverance.
Consistent. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've seen, and what it taught me about entrepreneurship as I traveled, one of the things I look at is every economic level. So when you see, if you're in a major developing world city and there's what we would call a shanty town or a slum or something, it looks like that on the outside. You see rundown sort of cardboard houses and corrugated steel, sort of tin roofs and things like that. And you think, oh, those are the poor people. But then if you actually go in, which I would do, and obviously go in a safe way, some places are dangerous, so go in, it's safe. But if you actually walk in to what are the roads and of these neighborhoods, you will find the entrepreneurs in full force. You'll see the hairstylists, the dressmakers, the electricians, the mechanics, the one who rents out the TV for people to watch movies like this. And it's incredible to think about in a place where, from our perspective, we have our sort of North American eyes on things and we think, oh, they don't have any resources, they're just sitting around. There's nobody sitting around, people are so resourceful. And then when you see that all over the place, you see it in every country and on every continent, you realize like, wow, there's something going on here. There's something built into our DNA that always pulls these people out of any situation to get things going. So even what looks like a poor neighborhood, there's some intrepid, entrepreneur who's figured out how to string electricity for everyone. And it's the same sort of, I'll say again, sort of DNA or the same kind of spirit that has got, the billionaire sitting in a mansion somewhere who figured out how to tinker with a computer. I mean, so this is something that I believe is happening everywhere. And just on I don't want to get into deep geopolitics or anything, but it just so happens that a lot of the multilateral organizations like the World Bank, the United Nations, the OECD, all those people that you pay for with your tax dollars, they have entrepreneurship programs. And I've always been intrigued by this gap between, let's say, our street level behavior where the family and friends are telling everybody, oh, don't go into business, it's too scary. And then but we're paying technically with our tax dollars for researchers to develop entrepreneurship programs that they're pushing out to the entire world. So there is that disconnect between, what we say and what we do. So what I've learned both the I would say like the technical, administrative level of entrepreneurship, which are these programs that are run to try and build entrepreneurship all over the world. And then I've just seen it on a street level with the average person who goes out there and starts to build a business, and can be anything from the little, store in what looks like a poor neighborhood to us, but it's, it's a store and that's how they're making money. And sometimes, yes, it's entrepreneurship by default. They don't have a choice. And oftentimes they could have gone out and maybe got a job in a factory or something, but they decided, no, they'd rather do something on their own. And that's that entrepreneurial spirit. So if you're one of those people who feels that urge, you can, and it's important to understand, again, you're in a world where there's a lot of other people who do the same thing and have that same sensation that you do. And I just think it's just part of our humanity to make sure that we have progress.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What you said about, about entrepreneurship being in, not necessarily having as much to do with whether it's in poorer communities or wealthier communities or whatever. Like we all have this sort of drive within us. I mean, that's I kind of had an interesting thought as you were talking about that if when your back's up against the wall and you need to make progress in some way, and entrepreneurship, trying to figure something out on your own, I wonder if that's more of a default than not. We think like, we don't think of it as a real safe, road, that there's more established, that, get a job with a company that's well established, that, it's a lot safer. But, it's interesting that, if people are turning to entrepreneurial, to just figuring it out themselves and making a business and like, hey, I need to make money, I'm going to figure this out on my own. I wonder if that's actually more of a default, back against the wall kind of reaction than not. So,
yeah, it could be. Our first instinct is survival. So, and who can you rely on except yourself? And so you have to start looking at what you can do. And I think for this time right now, this 2020 is the year that what you've just said becomes even more important. And I think visible to people, this idea that you have to be self-sufficient. You have to be able to respond and react to any situation, which is what entrepreneurs do. And sadly, we've all sort of grown up with this idea that the safe world is the one to go get a job for someone else. When in fact, if you take a look what's happening right now, who's still working? And if you're not still working, who's figuring out a way to work? It's the entrepreneurs, along obviously with the essential workers who are working so hard and so on. But so it is this, I think this is what's happening now. More and more people are seeing this reality. It's like, wow, like, and we need solutions right now more than ever. So not only is it that you have your back against the wall just in general, because maybe you've lost your job or something, but also you have this entire world crying out for solutions to so many problems at the same time that if you've got, any instinct in you to help in that process, this is your opportunity.
Yeah, Case, you brought up a point that I was just going to touch on. I mean, when you look at it, right? Obviously, we're at what's going on right now is unprecedented. Obviously, it's happened way before, something similar, way before we even could imagine, right? Like, or could really comprehend, because we're living in a day and age where everything just seemed to be easy, seemed to be coming to us with technology. And then COVID comes. And then all the people that were scared, are the people that were like, hey, don't start that business, because it's unknown for them. They put themselves in a bubble, right? It's like when you go through college, when you go through all the stations that basically a lot of life dictates to you to a certain degree, right? A lot of people don't have that flexibility, and they build that comfort of knowing, okay, I went to school, I went and through the motions, I got my master's, I'm here, I'm in the corporate world, living this structured environment. And you almost get into like a drone mentality of you're just going, right? And you're just, oh, thank God it's Friday. How many times have you heard that, right?
Right.
Your entrepreneurs never say, thank God it's Friday.
No, I don't even know it's Friday.
Exactly. Yeah. Our minds, we don't even know what day it is because our minds are constantly going. But it's like all those individuals that were saying, don't do this, it's rough. And then seeing so many people struggling without a job now. And, obviously it's affected entrepreneurs as well, but we've had to learn how to pivot, right? It's just another challenge that we can use and leverage going forward, because with restaurants, if you're an entrepreneur and you're in the restaurant industry right now, you're going to have to pull all kinds of tools out of your utility belt. I mean, and try to figure out how to leverage online ordering and have ghost companies to where you might have another restaurant inside your restaurant that nobody knows about, right? Like I know one because I work with one right now. Okay, they make American food and now they're making Asian food. And it's like, nobody has a clue. And when you learn that, it's so interesting to see how these businesses are learning how to overcome some of these struggles, and they're adapting. And it's so encouraging to me because that's true entrepreneurship, right?
Absolutely.
Finding a solution to a problem. And it's awesome.
Yeah, because even when you're starting out let's say in a booming economy, you're starting out your business, the typical entrepreneur, I've never heard of any entrepreneur who started with one idea and that was what the final successful business became, right? So you're always like, it's part of getting to success is that pivoting and adapting and transforming and changing and responding. Like that's what the entrepreneurship road is anyway. So of course, in this time, it's obviously much more dramatic, but in a boom time, it would still be part of what you would be doing. And I think that's important for a lot of people who worry about what's the fear in entrepreneurship. And that's one of the things is that, most people aren't successful. And they always say that. But again, the difference is the people who keep going. So if you have a good idea and it came to you because you saw a gap and you saw a problem and you had a solution. So there's a way to get there. So maybe your product doesn't start out very well. But then if you keep tweaking it, it eventually clicks with the consumers. Or maybe you've got a good product, but your marketing's not very good. So you have to tweak the marketing and keep adapting. So it's a person who's able to keep doing that who eventually hits on that success. And it's the ones who kind of give up that, become the statistics that then everybody else uses to say it doesn't work. So.
Right. And it's the one that actually takes action instead of having that thought in their head.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if you're obsessed with the process of entrepreneurship, of building a business, instead of being obsessed, some people are obsessed with the product. And if you obsess too much about it, you might lose focus of, you might have a decently successful product, but it might not be, you might be missing out on a much bigger opportunity by not just being like, hey, I love this process. I'm going to stick with it no matter what. And I think we all have to be okay too, to just fail, like completely, and not even just pivot a little bit, but pivot all the way into
bring it all down.
Business. Yeah, exactly. Take what we've learned and put it into something else. I think we have to be okay to do that. And that's part of the persistence is like, okay, I got knocked down. That didn't work for me, but entrepreneurship will work in some way, right?
Yeah.
As long as you keep going and you keep learning and adapting. So I think that's kind of the powerful thing. I remember thinking that years ago that I'm going to make something work. I don't know what it is, but we'll start with one thing. And now if I start a new business, I'm like, I see the product or service from the beginning and I'm like, I wonder how this is going to end up at the end. I can't see it now. It's probably not going to be this exactly, but we'll see, we'll take it on the journey. So
yes. Yeah. And I'm glad you said that it's an educational experience because, it's not so much a failure because you'll take what you learned and you'll build on it. And each incremental step will get you closer and closer. So I always like to say, just take it as a learning experience, even if it, you end up shutting down completely whatever that idea is and starting something brand new. Take everything that you did already was a learning experience, and then you move on to the next one.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. So going back to your business a little bit, your consulting and coaching business, what stage of business are the entrepreneurs that you work with typically, and what kind of businesses are they usually running?
So I'm at the very beginning. So I'm for the people who say they'd love to get a business started, but don't know where to start. and because I draw mostly from what I call second career professionals. So I should say, I had a foreign service career. And then after business school, I was a management consultant. And then I was a corporate exec. So I've done things like business process redesign and change management and some of these things, consulting things. So that's the world I draw from. And people are looking at then how they transition those skills to an online business. So almost all of it is based around information products and teaching, instructing people, courses and so on around analyzing businesses and supporting business operations. Some of it's technical, like there's accountants and so on, but most of it is around looking at business operations. And actually for the online business world, there's this work that, people get started, right? And they move quickly and the business ramps up and so on. And then they realize that their systems don't exist. and it's very difficult to scale because the entrepreneur is still doing everything. That's very common. An entrepreneur starts out, as a solopreneur and then has a very difficult road making the transition to finding a good team and so on. And so there are people that are looking at how to help the online businesses that are ramping up quickly to make that transition. That's just something that's new for me, but I know that's going on. Yeah.
And that's a good business opportunity of itself, that servicing other businesses as there's more and more opportunity for, millions of people to start something. Servicing businesses maybe 20, 30 years ago was much smaller. Like I remember when Shopify came around, I thought, it's pretty inexpensive. It's pretty easy to get into. But I wonder how they're doing well, because how many businesses are really, starting and building on their platform. And then I just had no idea, it's like $1 billion business and there's so much opportunity with a ton of other, web building platforms that are competing. There's still plenty to go around. So yeah.
But I should say also, I really want to encourage people, because I like to tell people you don't have to have any kind of education credentials or specific work experience or something like that to get into online business. Yeah, I know there's this debate about experts and so on. Now, there are laws governing experts, so you cannot provide advice under the banner of being an expert if you're not
Don't give
specifically
medical advice if you're
credentialed.
not a doctor. Yeah.
Yes. So there's that. So that exists already. Everything else is fair game. So and your expertise comes from being one step ahead of other people. You could just be that person who is able to bring information together. So I don't want to, if a lot of people they go, oh, I don't have any specific credential or something. You don't need a credential. And I have people that are building businesses off of their hobbies as well. Out of a favorite TV show, out of what they like to do, looking after animals, because they have information just from their experience doing something in volunteer work. That is, other people want to do it also, but don't know how to do it. So if you are somebody who can take that information, if you're somebody who has spent time researching something, and you could take that information and put it into a good website where all that content is together, where people can find it, that is then makes you, I always say, it makes you the automatic leader in your niche, and there you go from there. So, don't worry about having to be somebody who just needs to have letters after their name, because that's not how it works.
I love how you bring that up, because you can literally sit around again with no credentials to your name and sit around and watch YouTube videos on a specific niche that you're interested in and just collect all that information. I mean, or like you said, you can go on the internet and just search and just bring it all in and have it showcased in one centralized location. Just makes you the subject matter expert, because you're pulling and you're talking about it and you're getting the conversation started. And I love how you just painted that picture for our audience, for sure.
Yeah, I always remember when you're a consumer too. So what are you doing online? That's what I say to people. What are you actually doing? And the thing is, most of us are searching. Like, we're searching on Google, we're searching on Amazon, even on Facebook. If we're searching for a cute cat video because we want 5 minutes of entertainment or whatever, we're still searching, right? So if everybody's out there searching for stuff, that means that there's an opportunity, to place your content front and center, and people literally tell you what they're searching for when they type it into the Google search bar or they type it into the Amazon search bar. So this is just an extraordinary opportunity for you to see what people are looking for. And if that's an interest of yours and you can address it, you can provide that solution.
Yeah. And what do you think? You start with? Content and building an audience, or a product and then getting the content and building an audience from there? What do you typically teach?
So I start where nobody starts, with yourself. So this is my book Recast, which is my latest book release, and it's the first 10 actions to take. And so the first 5 are foundational. And because I'm always worried about people who don't keep going, and I really want to grow the entrepreneurial community and really encourage people. And I look closely at why do they stop. And it seemed to me that it was these very trivial things, well, not really trivial in the end, but they just didn't get set up correctly. So I always start initially, foundationally. I'll just quickly go through, you figure out where you're going to work. You get your tools around you. You get your schedule set. You set aside the time and you stay committed to the time. So you start there. And then you get into what I call the creative steps, which is now we're working on the business. And we start again with your interests, your skills, your hobbies, where do you want to focus your attention? If you have a business idea and you're good to go on that, we'll go forward with that. But what part of that business idea are you interested in? So if you are interested in gardening, what part of gardening? Is it the plants? Is it the soil? Is it the water? You still have to figure that out. So we focus a great deal on the business idea. And then the next thing would be the platform. So then where are you most comfortable presenting that idea? Is it again, you want to be a writer, a blog, podcaster? Are you good on camera? Do you want to, and one of the things I always tell people is, if you don't like any of those things, part of the online business world is the gig economy. is the people who you can hire to do it for you. So you could have a great idea, and let's say you're an executive, you're a corporate executive, and you just want to manage people. Okay, cool. Then we figure out how to put together your virtual team that is able to execute on your idea, and you can manage it and have that as your business on the side. You don't have to create the videos, you don't have to write the books, you don't have to do the rest of it. So that's the process, is to, and then so your interests, your platform, and now yes, you get into your content and your community at that point. Because when you go to look at your community, you want to, you have to know where you plan to approach them from. So if you're going to the podcaster community, you have to think about how people absorb information when they're listening to podcasts. So what is the content that you're going to create for that? Is it, you have, and I always stress the content, because your position as the automatic leader only holds if you have a unique perspective and a singular approach. That then you've got no competition. You're in that world by yourself. So that means your content, though, has to be really good at addressing whatever that unique perspective is that you're going with to meet that community's needs. So you're going to be working on creating content from the platform that you've decided you're most comfortable at. And again, as I mentioned before, if you're not even sure about that, just start off trying all the different ones. I also say, where do you like to spend your time? So if you spend a lot of time watching YouTube videos, but you don't think you like YouTube videos, well, let's take a look at that. Let's see what we can figure out there. Maybe, and if you don't want to be on camera, there's a lot of cool videos that do animation and this type of thing. So we sort of work through that, and then really focus on good content that really meets the needs of that community. And the biggest piece, of course, then becomes the marketing and the promotion and the distribution of that content so that people can find it.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, I love that. Definitely.
Yeah, that's super powerful. So, Case, through your entrepreneurial journey, from the highs to the lows, everything you experienced, what has been the most difficult thing about entrepreneurship to date?
Mm-hmm. I call it rewiring my brain. So having been the one, like I said, doing what I was supposed to do and doing it often, I've worked for I've worked for a small business, the government. I've worked for a private partnership at a big global corporation. So I know all of those workplaces. I've been back to school a few times. So I've done, and I'm a big fan, because I'm a big fan of education and knowledge. So I know why people don't like college. And I agree on some of the, reasons that people are, especially right now, like you're not going to be paid to go, for an online experience, when the best part of college is your network and your interactions and so on. But we can get that part. But so having done all of that, it always sticks in the back of your mind. Then how in the world can you walk away and go and start your own business on something you don't know anything about? Like when I first started out, like I said, with ebooks, self-publishing, I didn't know how to put something on Amazon. Like I'll see people make that comment today, in forums and stuff and Facebook groups, or how do you actually put a book on Amazon? And I was that person. I was like, I can't believe you just let anybody put a book up there. It can't be correct. There's got to be a trick. Right. There's got to be something going on here.
Yeah, somebody's got to be checking this.
Yeah. So, and then all the terminology I didn't know. What's a lead page and a squeeze page and all this? And I'm like, well, I've got a law degree, I've got an MBA, I've got all these other skills. Like, why am I trying to learn all of these things, all this new stuff? But the new stuff I'm also, obviously, since I keep switching careers and so on, I just have to have something new. I get to that point. I could have stayed in any of the careers and just sort of drifted along and maybe, whatever the rise would have been. But I always get to that point, like, yeah, I need the challenge, and I can see the future in that sense. Like all of these skills are now, and obviously I didn't predict that everybody would go online overnight, but you can see how eventually we would have, right? It was already, we were on that road. People had been talking about working from home for years already, and a lot of companies had started to do it. And that was kind of a news story. Oh, this company's going to allow people to work from home on Fridays or whatever. And now, then overnight, it just had to become everybody. And I write future world thrillers, and I'd already, had that sort of in my mind that, yeah, we'd all be working from home one day. But it's beyond that. It's understanding how technology works. When you use, Facebook ads to target specific communities, and you see how information is being gathered. I find this really fascinating. I know it's all, there's the nefarious and evil parts of it too, but it's extremely fascinating to me that this whole multiple businesses have been created around data, and what does that data mean, and how it's being used, and what information people are giving them. And when you go back to college as a non-traditional student, and you're a little older, and you kind of see how people really use social media, it's very eye-opening.
Yep, for sure. It's not always for progress.
Not at all.
But it gives you real insight into, okay, what is that data really gathering? Because is that anybody who thinks that social media is what people's real life is, I hate to break the news to you, that is not people's real life.
For sure not. Yeah, for sure.
But intellectually, it's wonderful to be a part of it, and so I get so much more out of every day. And I had great jobs at a good time and all that type of thing, but you always reach this point where you're hired to do a job for a company. They expect you to do that job, and of course, you can try and get promoted and switch and do things and all that kind of stuff. But in general, you're still expected to do that job. And when you work as an entrepreneur and you're learning and you're in this whole big world of online business, and there's so much going on in online business, and you can spend a day, on digital marketing, and then the next day on landing pages and so on, and we're learning how to do YouTube videos or whatever. And all of that are skills that you can be using now. You can totally see where you're going to use these skills going forward.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So
you can apply them in any way, whether you decide to help other people, do that, whether you kind of become part of the gig economy where you're like, hey, I started this business and I got really good at editing videos, and I actually really like this to the point where, I could do this for somebody else, and I could actually have another business with that. So yeah, you realize how important all these skills are. And I think having a plan like you put together for your clients or you help them with is really important, because it's Clint and I have talked about this a bunch, but it's so easy to get sidetracked and so easy to just, go down a rabbit hole of like one little thing. And then you're like, well, I have 100 other things to do, and I haven't even made a decision about this one thing. So you got to kind of get that plan and then work towards it every day. What am I doing to accomplish something? Yeah.
And I call it an action plan. I don't allow people to say business plan, because business plan is a business plan is a document that you create for other people. And I want to stress that there's rising entrepreneurs who are all afraid, I got to do a business plan. No, not unless you have a scheduled meeting with VCs, on the calendar. You don't need to do a business plan. The business plan is for other people. It's for bankers and VCs, for venture capitalists. For everybody else, you need an action plan. And an action plan is the activities that you're doing to actually get the business up and running.
Definitely agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. And that is your business plan. That is the thing that you need to do, because that's what the business plan really should be. Unless, like you said, unless you're trying to get capital and you need something to, you need to show something really solid and put all these numbers together. But sitting there and doing financial projections into the next 5 years doesn't help anybody.
No.
Fun to do sometimes. It's fun to be like, ooh, that's a big number at the end of at the end of that time, but it doesn't actually help with anything,
Right.
Besides just having some kind of rough idea of how big your market is and what the potential is. Other than that, it's like move on and figure out what you actually need to do.
Yeah. You can get an idea just from Googling for a couple of minutes. I was listening to the CEO of Cauliflower, cauliflower, but Cauliflower, and she was talking about how she looked for recipes, cauliflower, like pizza dough recipes or whatever. And there were 569,000 results on Google. but none of, but she didn't see any that addressed the issue she was looking for, which was to cook them quickly. And so now I'm using this example all the time with people to point out how this works, because now that's a company, right? Because yes, okay, some people say, oh, there's already 500,000 recipes, everybody knows, but no, there are 500,000 recipes but not the one that cooks it in 2 minutes or whatever, not the one that cooks it quickly. And not only that, it shows that there's also a market. So, so I like to use that example to sort of point out, this is how things move forward. And then you could spot that, you realize there's an issue, you realize there's a solution that you have, and you get to work on building your company.
That's awesome. Well, Case, we could definitely talk to you for a while here. There's so many things. We'll definitely have to have you back. But as we wrap up this episode, what's one piece of advice that you could give our audience to help them on their entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I always say just keep going. I had given you a long answer to your earlier question about the difficult thing, and I recognize that is the most difficult thing, is to be questioning yourself and saying, "Oh, I should just call my ex-boss or whatever and see what they're doing," and you want to think about that. But again, if you're that person, you can't get business ideas out of your head. You keep seeing things, or even if you don't have an idea, but you're thinking, I really want to be on my own. I want to be entrepreneurial. I want to be self-sufficient. I want to provide solutions. And if you're thinking like that, then that's already in you, right? There's something there. So remind yourself of that when you're, like we were talking about, how you have to continually be iterating your product or your service, trying to find the market. You could be getting discouraged. Nobody's clicking on your landing page, and you've tried 20 different things. You've changed the headline. Well, maybe it's going to be headline 27. You don't know. So you got to keep going. So when you're feeling like that, just remind yourself why you're doing that, why you want to be an entrepreneur. I always talk about not just money, of course, is, everybody loves the bling and we all want the money, but think about professional satisfaction, being able to do what you really want to do, using your skills to the highest level, really branching out and using your brain completely, instead of being in a job where you're just doing what somebody else wants you to do. And then think about, of course, lifestyle freedom. Think about all the times when you were not able to do something you wanted to do. Think about, here we are at a time where nobody could go anywhere. Well, think about that family wedding last year where you could have gone you really wanted to go for a week, but you only went for a day because you had to get back to work. Think about things like that. And that hopefully will give you the momentum to just, all right, motivation, keep going, and don't give up, keep pursuing it. Because if you're that entrepreneurial person, we need you right now in the economy, obviously, to just help us get through everything that's going on and to get these new ideas out into the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's usually, that has been enough motivation for me, just thinking about all the freedom that I could, have if I just keep going and work hard now and set things up to have more flexibility down the road.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. Well, guys, I think that's a wrap for this episode. From the both of us, Case, we want to thank you for taking the time into your day to help us add value to what we're trying to do on our podcast.
And thank you so much for having me on the show. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Case. It was great to have you on. So guys, thank you so much for listening to That Entrepreneur Life. To learn more about what Case is working on, check out readyentrepreneur.com. If you like what you heard today, make sure to subscribe to our podcasts on iTunes or any other major podcast directory. You can also find us on all the socials and on our website at thatentrepreneurlife.com.
And with that said, we also want to quickly give a special shout out to our family and friends, to include all of our listeners, followers, and subscribers. If you find value in our show, please consider making a donation. Even just a few dollars helps us keep things moving along or brings value to your entrepreneurial journey. Thanks for continuing to support what we do as entrepreneurs, guys. And don't forget to join us next week for another episode of That Entrepreneur Life.
Thanks for listening to That Entrepreneur Life podcast. Be sure to visit thatentrepreneurlife.com to join the conversation, access our show notes, and discover our fantastic bonus content. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode as we continue to add value. Until next time.